Matrix is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. That punchline came from the feature film The Matrix more than a decade ago. The truth is, we're already so wired in, so passively and actively dependent on our phones, our apps and our clouds, that our lives, our work is already being run by things we don't control, perhaps don't even understand. Years ago, when a blackout happened, you realized how dependent you are on electricity, your fridge, AC, pankha, TV, everything gone. Today, for about 30 minutes, WhatsApp crashed globally. People were restarting their phones, thinking others were ignoring them, reinstalling the app. In 30 minutes, we learned a valuable lesson. How many of your photos are stored and synced into a cloud somewhere? How many of your contacts are actually saved on Google's Gmail servers? How many of your important emails and documents are lying on all these places? What would happen if any one of these things just plain disappeared one day? We don't know what went wrong, whether this was a security breach, an overload, or an error caused by an app update. But it was spooky. 1.3 billion people around the world are on WhatsApp. How many WhatsApp groups are you on? How many of you just take for granted that messages and numbers are stored on WhatsApp? You can just search through the app to find them when you need them. What if it suddenly disappears? We've had the warning, The Matrix warned us, and Hollywood has been masala-fying for decades. What lessons do we learn? It's a debate that affects every one of us. Let's have it. Here's what happened.
From 250,000 users in 2009 to 1.3 billion users in 2017, WhatsApp, one of the world's most used mobile applications, witnessed a global outage, sending users into a tizzy.
On our screens, we have, one of the funnier memes. So obviously, someone was able to see the comedy in the entire situation. We have this meme of Robert Downey Jr. gasping at the entire situation, and then we have another funny one right here, which says, WhatsApp has crashed and my life is like, and you can see the video that follows.
While the raging debate continues whether it was a hack or overload, the glitch, which lasted for over 30 minutes, shows the vulnerability of mobile applications.
All people who are relying too much upon technological platforms must quickly realize that they cannot take these technological platforms for granted.
From sharing messages and videos with your near and dear ones to sending a recorded audio message or broadcast message, its features only add up with its free calling facility and easy use.
Facebook acknowledged that they have received the information and they are looking into the matter, although they haven't really come out with a statement as to what really happened, what really went wrong. But we're happy to report that now the service seems to be restored.
With the shift in saving one's data from gadget to the cloud, the big question arises, are your apps making you more dependent or independent? Can you live without your applications? Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now here's an important conversation to have. Let's have it. Gaurav Upriti, my colleague, is joining us. He's a man all tech in NewsX. Karnika Seth, a cyber law expert, with me in the studio as well. Pawan Duggal, a cyber expert, joining us from Delhi. Vivan Saran, partner from the Cohen Advisory Group, joining us. He knows a thing or two about cyber security. Rakshit Tandon is also joining us via Skype in just a bit. Gaurav, have you figured out what went wrong?
Not as yet. So we really don't have confirmation as to what really went wrong. Facebook just acknowledged the situation and they passed a statement that they're looking into the matter. They are still investigating it. But it seems that in India, it's pretty much restored. They're only isolated incident. But elsewhere, people are still reporting a slowdown, not a total blackout.
So then the big question, Gaurav Upriti, can you live without your apps?
I can, maybe.
Okay, what does that mean? I mean, because the reality is we are wired in, and perhaps we passively don't realize how much of our lives are now dependent on things we perhaps don't understand and control.
Exactly. I mean, it's only in situation like these you realize how much you're actually hooked to it, because the whole impulse of looking at those notifications, checking out what's there, what you're missing out, and when the service like WhatsApp really goes wrong with the WhatsApp, you realize that, okay, maybe there are other services which are available maybe I can get along with my life. But somewhere it still, lingers on that.
But it's, I mean, there are some impulse services, whether you want to check out what other people are doing and all that. But WhatsApp has, become work related. I can't tell you how much of our work goes around over WhatsApp groups, Gaurav. So let me quickly open this up. Vivan, what lessons do we learn today from this?
Rishabh, I think there are 3 key lessons for me. One is, of course, that like you said, this service, like so many others, has scaled up so quickly over just a few years. I think we have to now figure out, as these apps scale up, to meet their business goals, what levels of responsibility and quality of service can they give their consumers. That's number one. Number 2 is that I think WhatsApp it's an encrypted service, as you know. So clearly, given the fact that so many people were affected by its outage, means that we value our privacy, and how that juxtaposes against government's need to lawfully intercept messages for national security. This is going to be an open debate that India will have over the years to come. And the third is that clearly, because we've been affected because we couldn't switch to another service seamlessly when we stopped getting access to WhatsApp, which clearly means also that these services are not quite free. I mean, WhatsApp charges us about $1, which is not really what they depend on for making money. They depend on our data to monetize their service. And at the same time, they argue that this is a free service or almost free service, and therefore, the switching costs is nearly nil. But there is a competition issue underlying this, because if you can't switch from one service to another because your data is in one particular place, yes, I think conversations around data portability, competition, etc. are pretty prominent.
No, it's the truth here. I'm going to quickly rope in Karnika Seth and then Pawan Duggal. Karnika Seth, the reality is, and let me dumb down the question. If my electricity goes at my house, I have somebody to call up and and say come fix it. If my laptop isn't working, I can take it to a service center. If my phone connection ain't working, I can call up the helpline and say I'm having a problem from a different number. But when my contacts, I don't know the last time I actually noted down on paper what my phone contacts were. They're all synced somewhere in some cloud somewhere and just transfers from phone to phone. If I lose them, who do I call up and complain to?
Exactly. I mean, this is something that we are all dependent on the technology today, and no matter whether it's contacts or it's photographs or it's any catalog, even when you say Twitter or any other account you have,
my photographs are on some cloud somewhere.
You back up your articles, what you've posted, what your interviews are. So everything is there.
we are being petulant, but there could be important business documents, there could be contracts that are somewhere up there, and the disclaimers which we never read, yes, I'm sure include these kind of things, yes, that way one day you can just switch off and then
when
what do we do?
When you sign up for a service, you have a click wrap agreement. You just say I agree, and that's there. So you're agreeing to the situation, that the disclaimers which are put in there, that if there are untimely interruptions or accidental glitches or technology, they are not liable. So clearly the disclaimers are there, but yes, it plays a havoc on certain individuals.
Okay. Pawan Duggal, now you've been speaking to us during the course of the day and advising caution, and you saying this is a bit of a wake up call, and I agree with you, sir. But again, it comes back to my premise. For people who are watching this broadcast, who I say are passively dependent, don't perhaps realize, is only today I realize that actually I should do something with my contacts list because it is lying on a Gmail synced server, and if I lose that for some reason, I wouldn't know how to access it. My basic problem is, who do we call up? Who's the WhatsApp wala in this case?
There is no WhatsApp wala, there is no point of contact nor of call. We are all by our own selves. We are all swimming in this very ruthless sea known as the internet. So very quickly we have to realize that, well, these apps are important, but they are not life. Life was going on for civilization for thousands of years, minus these apps, and was doing perfectly well. So if we can start making a demarcation between our real life and our digitally wired life, that will be helpful. And I think if this kind of outage takes place, it should actually be only warning us of one small thing, which is that these kind of instances will now keep on happening at regular frequency. So what happens? Shall we stop? Today, when this WhatsApp was stopped, a lot of governmental documentation which was on WhatsApp, which was going from one center to the other, suddenly was in a frozen pipeline, which nobody knows what was happening. So I think people need to be consciously
And
clear.
I can tell you, I can tell you as a journalist, political parties, government departments, IAS officers, police officers have WhatsApp groups. They transfer information, they send documents increasingly via WhatsApp and not via email. Vivan Saran. Now in the end, these are services, right? WhatsApp is providing you a service. It's a product, but it's mostly a service. And to traditional services that I contractually take out, like I mentioned, I have a guy to call in case it's not working. Now in this case, when you don't have a guy to call, what responsibility do then online service providers have or should be having?
No, yeah, absolutely, Rishabh. This is a very important issue, particularly given that we are in the era of aggregation services, of app-based services, of sharing, of the shared economy, so to speak. So WhatsApp is of course, because we share documents, we share important information, we don't know where that information goes when there are outages, and that creates a lot of insecurity. But think even beyond WhatsApp, now the digital world is intersecting so intrinsically with the physical world due to the sharing economy. Where do we go to when we have to complain about a taxi ride? I think that's a more fundamental issue.
We've learned that lesson.
We've had security concerns in India around this. We still don't have a consumer grievance mechanism. And therefore, I think once these companies achieve a certain threshold, a certain scale, it is incumbent upon them, maybe through a compact that they can
pretty much everybody in the planet, 1.3 billion.
Incumbent upon them
Where are they going to realize the scale,
a certain degree of intervention and consumer responsibility.
Where's that scale?
Well, in India also, we have that.
Sorry, what was that?
Vivan, where's the scale? Because you're talking about 1.3 billion, 2 billion people. I mean, how do you get to a bigger scale than that?
Correct, and given that you have this kind of scale, what is your commensurate responsibility to invest into consumer redressal? If I want to pull out a document that I've shared with somebody and it's time bound, I'm going into for instance, a land acquisition deal, and for some reason my sale deed is on WhatsApp and that's the only service I'm dependent on at the time of registry, can I call up somebody who can give me that one document without putting up the entire service again online? These are both technological questions as well as business responsibility
serious questions. Okay,
and
Gaurav,
companies cannot shy away from
Gaurav, come in on this, because here's the thought. I mean, when a crime was reported on Uber, the cops told us that they actually had to download the app, call an Uber, and then ask the guy to take us to the headquarters because they didn't know where it existed. These are serious concerns, and like I said, who do we figure this out? Vivan is talking about scale. Now these are supposed to be multi-billion-dollar companies. You add the sum total of Facebook and Google, and it's more than India's GDP in terms of what their market cap is worth. What do we demand as consumers?
Exactly. I mean, that's what the company said. You are coming in. These are the guidelines. This is the agreement. You sign up. You
take it or leave it.
Yeah, and most of the time the thing is, cops, they would not even have any idea what services you're using. It's unless you come to them, you explain it to them, then they figure out, all right. But then again, jurisdiction, how do you intervene? Because there's issue of privacy also, because the company would say, okay, we are keeping your data secure and we don't even want to share it with the government.
Yes.
So either you believe them, all right, they're keeping it safely, or you ask the government, no, intervene, I really want to get everything back.
Okay, but again, Karnika wants to come in.
I just want to say one thing, that even the IT Act, for instance, I mean in our case, the due diligence guidelines demand that there should be a public grievance officer, and that grievance officer should be listed on the website of every service that they are offering. Not only that, apart from the contractual claim, okay, they put a disclaimer there, but there is a tort law in India also. We have common law. So when you have a duty to take care and there is a breach of that duty, which is leading to a loss to somebody, you have an actionable claim.
Look, loss happens. My laptop can crash, but I physically own that laptop. Karnika, could you help us explain? So if I'm buying a Google Drive space or a cloud space, and I'm sharing 3 or 4 terabytes of data, most of it for us might be frivolous, but for certain corporations, for certain individuals, there might be important documents. Do I actually own a part of Google Drive?
Well, it is the service, when they give the service, they say that, okay, we will be keeping this safe and secure. It's there for you. So that space, practically, you're actually being, you're blocking that space for yourself.
Yeah, so but as Vivan pointed out, when that server is down for that half an hour when I need it,
yes.
and I say, look, I don't care, I just need this one file, please find it for me and give it to me.
Now,
should there be some facility for getting me that?
Yes, there should be a backup. There should be some means of getting that information. And there
Okay,
have to be quick.
Pawan Duggal, how is it possible that the biggest, richest, smartest, nerdiest companies in the world haven't figured out these basics of consumer protection?
Well, I think it suits them because these big companies do not treat consumers as consumers. They treat them ruthlessly as data entities. Entities who are constantly generating data. So consequently, they believe that they have got some very 99% lopsided agreements in their favor. You take it or you leave it, and if the customer has taken your service, the customer is at your beck and call, he's at your mercy, and therefore any kind of expectation of consumer protection must instantaneously evaporate. That's what intermediaries.
Okay, so let me flip the argument around. Okay,
okay,
Pawan Duggal, I'm going to flip it around.
Has been completely
Okay,
spineless.
okay. Gaurav, let's flip the argument around, because there's certain consumer interface companies whose job is dealing with the consumer on a day-to-day basis. You take Amazon, you take Zomato here in India, right? If you have a complaint, you get on to them and they respond back to you. So their consumer interface is very, very good. Hey, my order hasn't come. Somebody gets back to you on the app itself. So that consumer interface is really good. How come there is such opaqueness and iron curtains when it comes to the really big companies?
All right. So, I mean, very
Not
good
to say
point.
Amazon is small, of course.
That's a good point, but that's like argument would be that's a commodity. Here we're talking about data, bits of data, millions of bits of data.
Yes.
So the company's argument is such that you need electricity to watch television. You're watching something important, the electricity goes. I mean, you might just complain that I want the electricity back because
but I have a guy to call, right? I mean, I have some department to call and say electricity, my wire is broken, come and fix it, or in my area electricity is not come. I don't have somebody. I can't call up Mark Zuckerberg, can I?
Well, the funny thing
Maybe
is,
you can. Maybe
you might have you have a contact us page, but you would send a query, but it's going to be a bot that's going to be replying to you with a standard message that we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Okay, Vivan Saran, how is it that some big companies, Amazon an example, which does a lot of consumer interfacing, which also provides, in a sense, a delivery service, right? They're not building the products; they're just delivering from end to end, either B2B or B2U. In this case, how come those big companies are getting consumer interfacing so well right, but the really big companies, which is Google, which is maybe WhatsApp, Facebook, are not bothering with it at all?
Rishabh, I think this is an institutional question. At the beginning of creating a product or service, what is your institutional ethos? I think for Amazon and Jeff Bezos, it was pretty clear. It's in their tagline, the consumers are first. And everyone is second, including, employees and other stakeholders and shareholders. But in the case of other products and services that we use from large platforms, which are increasingly integrating with other services horizontally, this is not the case. And I think this is going to be fairly problematic until we get the consumer aspect and the ethos within these institutions right. I think the consumer has to be first for them too, because we are of great value to all of these platforms.
You think?
Even though we don't pay for their service, they cannot hold an asymmetric contract against us and say that, this is what you, because you've signed up for it, this is what you get.
Okay, this is what you get.
I think we pay with our data, we pay with our time. They monetize that, and I think this asymmetry is not warranted.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
what I want to say here is, if there is a electricity failure, there's always a generator or something, a power backup.
Yeah,
so why not a server, which is a backup server?
We don't know. I'm presuming these
Why
backup
not?
servers exist, right? And I'm presuming they can transfer from one country to the other. I'm presuming they do exist. So given the fact that they do exist, my only question is, when it comes, and Gaurav, help us understand, when it comes to human interfacing, you're talking about bots are replying back to you, and that's a reality, automatically generated messages. How much of human interfacing, of human intervention is needed, and how much of it is doable, because if just the data points are just so many?
Well, of course, yeah, human intervention is there.
I mean, let's face it, no company can deal with 1.3 billion complaints in a day, right? Everybody today have a current complaint to WhatsApp, nobody would have been able to deal with it. But how many humans are really involved in the process?
Well, humans would be involved when something of this intensity happens. So
Right.
I'm sure now people are at it, they're working and sorting things out. But day-to-day basis, personal, my message not going through, it's really hard for companies also.
Okay, not
especially-
to care. Okay, postal department, courier agencies, Pawan Duggal, we all of them up. And they've dealt with these challenges, for a few hundred years on how to deal with large-scale operations that involve large-scale consumers, but yet consumer interfacing does exist. If your parcel goes awry in a massive courier operation also, you can still find it. Should big data companies, service providers be taking on this challenge or not bothering with it?
I think it's the urgent, immediate, crying need of the time that these companies need to take the challenge of consumer protection. These companies have to quickly realize if they are going to be ruthless about not trying to be concerned about consumers and their interest, then very quickly there will be history, because these very consumers will move on to the next space. And today, with internet coming in on a 24/7 basis, the expectation that my problem must be solved is now limited to a couple of hours.
True.
I'm expecting my complaint must be immediately resolved.
Yes.
That may or may not be possible, more so when lots of these companies are located outside the territorial boundaries of the country.
Yes, you're right.
So
We got
high
used
time
to
the
it.
country- the
I'm pretty
companies
sure when
try to
we were growing up,
understand
you
their
were used to
realistic,
solving a
practical
complaint and the guy would say, I'll come
expectations.
3 days later, and it was perfectly normal. Now you want him there within hours. That's how it's worked. That's perhaps a good thing. Vivan wants to come in. Vivan, go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree with this competition hypothesis that, because companies provide, bad service at one interval in their entire service delivery history, that users will be compelled to switch from them. Because we've seen that we are, in the digital economy, there are winner-takes-all markets that are developing,
Okay.
which simply means that the consumer is left with very little legitimate or credible or viable option to switch. And so, therefore, this is analogous to the situation that what we've seen in the past with the financial sector, where we have
it's an
had
interesting point.
systemically important financial institutions,
Yes.
which we have not been able to replace at the drop
you're
of
right.
a hat.
I'm out of time.
And
Now, I might want to go to a-
consumers were able to
Yeah.
demand, institutions were able to think about some responsibility
Yes, it's the
compacts.
same logic that came in the number portability, right? Or like I might want to go to a different messaging app, but I can't because everybody I know is actually on WhatsApp, so I have to stay within the system. I'm glad we've had this conversation. It's been a wake-up call for all of us for these reasons. If you passively don't know how much of your life is dependent on these things that are rotating around you, become aware now. Good night.